Hello and welcome to this week's Wildlife Matters podcast. I'm your host, Nigel Palmer, and we have an exciting adventure for you today. We are fast approaching Midsummer's Day, or Solstice Day, so we have followed a Bronze Age walk to Stonehenge on Solstice morning 2023, and we would love it if you came along with us. Our journey will transport us back over 4,500 years to explore the enigmatic neolithic earthworks, the ancient king barrows and the new king barrows. We were captivated by the monarch of the plain and witnessed the breathtaking sunrise on Solstice Day, framed by the Welsh bluestones that form the iconic Stonehenge. Of course, this walk will include plenty of wildlife and nature and one or two surprises that I hope you will enjoy. After a long walk across an ancient mystical landscape, imagine the tranquillity of spending a mindful moment in nature. This week we are in a serene woodland during the blossoming springtime, a perfect setting to unwind and connect with nature. But before all of that, we have an exciting announcement. On Saturday, the 22nd of June, Wildlife Matters will attend the London Restore Nature Now March. We invite you to join Wildlife Matters at the March to Restore Nature. And here's the exciting part. You can be featured on the Wildlife Matters podcast. Oh yeah, we will be recording a live podcast from the event, so do come over and say hello. We would love to hear your stories, which group you're from and why you are marching to restore nature. We have all the information you will need in this week's Wildlife Matters Nature News, and that is coming up next. So what are you doing on Saturday, the 22nd of June 2024? Well, if you care about wildlife and nature, Wildlife Matters urges you to attend the Restore Nature Now March in London. You can join Wildlife Matters and a wide range of wildlife and nature groups and charities and make it clear to our politicians that nature, wildlife and the environment are the top agenda items at the upcoming election. The Restore Nature Now March will call on all political parties to take action to restore nature and tackle climate change in the UK. The organisers hope to make this the most extensive UK demonstration to support the natural environment. Many organisations, including the RSPB, Wildlife Trusts, Bat Conservation, Plant Life, Bug Life and the National Trust, and many, many more, support the family-friendly legal march. Organisers want the general election to be a turning point for nature in this country, and significant action is needed. The UK has led the world in destroying its natural environment. That's according to Becky Spate, the CEO of the RSPB. She told us that here in the UK we care deeply about nature, but last year's State of Nature report laid out a grim picture, finding that there's been no let-up in the decline of our wildlife over recent decades, with 1 in 6 species now at risk of being lost from our shores. Chris Packham is among those calling most strongly for a politically led change in direction, And Chris told Wildlife Matters that ticking a box, signing a petition, sharing a post, it is simply not enough when facing the collapse of our living systems. It's time for all of us to take to the streets, shoulder to shoulder, whoever we are, and demand that our leaders restore nature now. The primary purpose of the march is to show politicians how deeply people care about these issues and to call for better leadership. But it also has some specific demands that include a pay rise for nature. Farmers manage 70% of UK land and have a massive role in supporting environmental recovery, but they need more support. We want to see nature and climate-friendly farming budget doubled. We want to make the polluters pay. Big businesses from water to retail to energy all contribute to environmental decline. We want new rules that require them to contribute to nature and climate recovery and an end to new fossil fuels. We want more space for nature. Just 3% of English land and 8% of water are properly protected for nature and wildlife. To meet UK nature and climate commitments, we must expand and improve protected areas and ensure public land and national parks contribute more to our recovery. We want a right to a healthy environment. Limited access to nature and pollution in the air and water affect everyone's health. We're calling for an environmental rights bill to drive better decisions for nature and improve public health and access to nature. And last but not least, we want a fair and effective climate action. We must solve the climate crises to save nature. We want investment in warm homes and lower bills by increasing home energy efficiency, supporting active travel and public transport, and replacing those polluting fossil fuels with affordable renewables to ensure we halve UK emissions by 2030. The Restore Nature Now March will take place on the 22nd of June 2024, beginning at midday at Park Lane and marching to a rally in Parliament Square. Wildlife Matters will be there recording a live podcast, and we would love to hear your stories and why you are marching to restore nature. You will see us at the start and during the march, where we will ask you your name, your group or charity, and most importantly, why you are marching for nature. Then we will record the speakers at the rally in Parliament Square and will release the bonus episode of Wildlife Matters live podcast of the Restore Nature Now March on Wednesday, 26th of June. For more information and to pledge your support, please visit the Restore Nature Now website. And that has been this week's Wildlife Matters and Nature News. We look forward to marching for nature in London next week, and it would be so empowering to meet some of you and find out why you are marching on the special podcast from the Restore Nature Now event. Your participation can significantly benefit wildlife and nature, so make sure you're there. We can't wait to hear your stories, so make sure you come and tell us. But now it's an early start as we take a Bronze Age walk to the magical Stonehenge on the solstice morning of 2023. The alarm shattered the silence of the morning, and I blinked into life. I rubbed my eyes. I knew it was 3:45 a.m. when I had set the alarm without checking my phone. I sprang out of bed in excited anticipation of the day that was to come. You see, I was parked in a lay-by, and as I sleepily peered out of the van windows, I could see the shortest night was fading into the longest day. Summer solstice in 2023, and I was about to take an ancient route to Stonehenge. I planned to follow the circular route from Durrington Walls through this ancient and mysterious landscape to Stonehenge, and then to return to my starting point. The route is available from the National Trust, which manages the Stonehenge landscape, meaning the land surrounding the monument is entirely free and open to the public. However, Stonehenge itself, managed by English Heritage, has admission charges. After a wash and breakfast with 2 cups of coffee, I sat on the van floor, put on my walking boots, and listened to the birdsong around me. The air was still and silent as I set off. A mist was beginning to lift. It looked like a light, wispy haze dancing just above the ground, but it seemed to disappear as I walked through it before reappearing behind me. The starting point for me was Durrington Walls, which is known as a superhenge enclosure back in the day. A henge is a neolithic earthwork with circular or ovular earth banks and an inner dip. Not all henges contained a stone circle or structure, though. Durrington Walls is known as a henge enclosure because the archaeologists have found evidence of occupation, and it was big. In fact, the second largest henge in Britain, with only Hindwell in Wales being larger. In 2023, what you are looking at as an untrained eye, and I am not an archaeologist, is a large raised earth bank that runs through or across field boundaries. The grass was dewy from the overnight mist, and my boots were getting wet as I walked up the earth bank and took some pictures. From here, my route would take me towards Woodhenge. The blackbirds, robins, and warblers filled the morning air with song as I walked along. My head torch was still on its lowest setting, just enough to pick out any obstacles in my way and for me to glance at the OS map when needed. The walking here is level and easygoing. Woodhenge is a Neolithic timber monument dating from around 2500 BC, which means it is older than Stonehenge. The feeling of our ancestors is always with you on this walk. It feels like you are just one of many, many people who have followed this route for thousands of years. Not once did I feel alone throughout this entire walk. As I walked through the early morning light, I couldn't see another person, but still I knew I was not alone. Woodhenge must have been a spectacular sight back in the day. The structure would have stood tall above this gently undulating landscape. So much of my research for this walk was done on the English Heritage website, which tells us that Woodhenge was formed of 6 concentric ovals of standing posts, surrounded by a bank and a dip. which were built to align with the summer solstice sunrise. Today, this magnificent wooden structure is long gone, but concrete posts have been put in the ground, allowing you to see and understand how our ancestors constructed it. I stood and tried to take in what I could before me. You can see how the site and monument were formed and how they aligned it for the summer sunrise over 4,500 years ago. At this moment, I wish I could have travelled back to see Woodhenge as it was back then. But for now, I have conjured up a magnificent wooden structure in my imagination, and that's how I will always see it. I hope you can imagine the magnificence and scale of this design and site for yourselves and come up with your own image of just how magnificent Woodhenge would have been. Returning back to 2023, I read my research notes and was shocked to learn that we had only discovered Woodhenge less than 100 years ago. It was actually found by an aerial photograph back in 1925. As I started to walk again, this time away from the sun's emerging light and heading west, I passed through a field gate and headed across the field in search of the cuckoo stone. The cuckoo stone is a local sarsen stone. Sarsen came from the ancient Wiltshire dialect and meant anyone who was not a Christian. Now, this could have referred to Druids or pagans as examples. Technically, the stone is a silicified sandstone found throughout southern England, but locally from Marlborough through to Salisbury. It is a dense and hard rock formed from sand and silica. The cuckoo stone itself is a little understated. I agree with the line of thought that suggests it would have stood upright originally, although no one can be sure of that. If you take a look at the picture I took, it has a shape towards the right that would have been the top. What now appears to be a random lump of stone sitting in a field is around 5,000 years old and was once thought to be a magnificent waymarker or signpost. And it is perfectly situated on the axis between Woodhenge, the Curses, which we will visit later in this walk, and the River Avon, which runs less than 100 metres east of Woodhenge. Perhaps it was a guide to the people who arrived in boats via the river. As I left the cuckoo stone, I pondered the many mysteries along this route. I headed south through a field looking for a gate, which right now I can't see. After a while, the gate came into view through the still misty early morning light. I knew I was going to take a right turn. This path was straight and flat, and stopping to check my notes and have a drink of water, I realised I was now on the route of the former Lark Hill Military Light Railway, which ran between Amesbury and Lark Hill. The railway was built in 1914 and ran throughout World War I until it was decommissioned in 1929. To my right is an area of woodland that was attracting my interest. This woodland was mature with broad-leaved, mainly oak and beech, and the birdsong I had enjoyed until now was very different. The song thrush had replaced its close cousin, the blackbird, and I could make out the songs of finches and warblers, but one bird's harmony and range were far superior. I stood quietly and listened to the magnificent melody of a nightingale. Beautiful. The woodland was fenced and had signs saying the military used it, and whilst no flags were flying today, I decided not to investigate it further. Just a short way further along the old railway line, I reached another path, running north to south across my path, and I headed south towards the King's Barrows. The King's Barrow Ridge was constructed in the Bronze Age and consists of barrows and burial mounds. The old King Barrows and the new King Barrows date from around 2200 to about 1600 BC. These barrows are from roughly the same period as the third phase of the building of Stonehenge. The old King Barrows consist of 7 bowl barrows that all lie north of the avenue, whilst the new King Barrows consists of 5 bowl barrows and 2 bell barrows that stand to the south of the avenue. The avenue is lined with beech trees on both sides. Many of the trees are gnarled and twisted and definitely of a good age. I mean, possibly 300-400 years as a guess, but certainly nowhere near the age of the burial mounds. As I walked along the avenue, looking at the lines of the burial mounds, I couldn't help but wonder about the life stories of those buried within these magnificent, beautiful, grass-covered banks. I'd like to think that they had a line of magnificent trees following the barrow in the thousands of years between the burials and these old but still relatively modern beech trees. Walking along the avenue in the early morning light gives me a wonderful, mystic feeling. The sun is still below the horizon, although its golden, yellow and orange light is beginning to illuminate the ground, and I turn off my head torch. As I left the avenue, I began to head towards the Cursors Barrows that run in an east-west layout. This collection of barrows of differing shapes, thought to date from around 3,500 years BC, predates the very earliest phase of the Stonehenge monument. My research tells me there are 16 to 18 barrows within this Cursors, but some are no longer visible. Because the Cursors Barrows are so close to Stonehenge, they have received a lot of archaeological attention since around the 18th century. Various centuries-long excavations have revealed many burial mounds, such as inhumations and cremated remains. The items buried with their dead owners are vast and varied and have included bronze daggers and awls, amber beads, various beakers and urns, deer antler, and flint tools. Interestingly, one burial mound excavation revealed chippings of Welsh bluestone from which Stonehenge is made. However, these mounds predate Stonehenge, so there is another mystery for you, and no, I don't have an answer. Walking along the Cursors towards the Fargo plantation, I get my first glimpse of Stonehenge in the distance. As previously explained, I am not an archaeologist, so forgive my layman's descriptions of what I can see. Just coming into view is a large bell barrow. It's around 3.5 meters tall, and it must be 25-30 meters in diameter. It has a ditch enclosing it. Up next is what appears to be a double mound. Perhaps a couple were buried independently, or maybe 2 brothers. I don't know, but they are impressive. They stand slightly shorter. They're maybe 3 meters tall, and a more oval-shaped ditch encloses both of the mounds. And the barrows keep coming. I can see another group of 4 barrows that are individual actually and not a group, and just beyond them another bell barrow. I understand that each barrow is numbered as either Amesbury or Winterbourne Stoke, and you can research each barrow individually. So there is a little bit of homework for you to do. I'm now heading towards the Fargo plantation, which contains a hengiform enclosure. Today, all you can see is a hollow in the ground. I'm unsure how it has been partially filled in, but it is an undulating and irregular at its base. My research notes tell me that the site was excavated in 1938, and at the centre of the area was a grave containing a skeleton with a beaker and a food vessel. So someone was very well prepared for the afterlife. I'm getting closer to Stonehenge, and the sun is beginning to peak above the horizon. The magnificent bluestones are now clearly in view, and my legs seem to push me forward with excitement and in anticipation. The path turns quite sharply in front of me, and then the full majesty of Stonehenge came into view. I was in a direct line to the rising sun. An information board later told me that the path access aligns with the sunrise at the summer solstice and the sunset at the winter solstice. I am deeply aware that I am just one of many, many, many generations who have walked this path on this very day for thousands of years. And I can't help but feel the stirring emotions deep within me. I've noticed the original banks and ditches running along the path and a large barrow to the side of me. And I can see a massive group of people gathered around the stones of the henge. To me, it feels like I've completed my own pilgrimage, and a happy elation spreads throughout my body. As I arrive at the fence separating the Stonehenge landscape from the English heritage triangle of land that surrounds the famous stones, I stood and watched the Druid celebrations that were already underway. The path I was on gave an excellent view of the sunrise, and you could hear the voices of those celebrating and their chants and incantations. I decided not to pay the admission fee and instead to sit here and enjoy the view. The security guys kept a low profile around the monument's edge, and they smiled and said good morning to me. I set up my tripod and prepared my camera. I was almost in direct line with the sun as it spread its light through the ancient stones. A couple of hours passed in the blink of an eye. I sat on the floor and poured coffee from my flask. I felt overwhelmed by the feeling of sharing an experience with so many people from today, but also from the past. And I sat and watched in awe and contemplation. With the warm sun sitting high in the late morning sky, I decided to say goodbye to Stonehenge for now and start the walk back. But there was one more barrow I really wanted to see. It's called the Monarch of the Plain, and I felt it calling me, although I didn't know why. I set off following my OS map grid reference. I knew the barrow was at the western edge of the Fargo plantation, so I began to read my notes as I walked along. The Monarch of the Plain is one of the more prominent bell barrows in the Kirkus. It is located in an open field on the edge of a woodland plantation. Unlike some of the barrows, it is really visible and imposing, measuring 58 meters in diameter, and it's around 2.5 meters tall. As you approach, a small oak, undoubtedly my favourite tree, stands in front of it, covered in grasses and with a healthy smattering of wild flowers. The oxeye daisies, another of my favourites, are most prominent as they dance in the gentle midday breeze. Although the Monarch of the Plain was excavated in 1938, the results of the excavation were perceived as more value was needed. The charred wood may have been used as a funeral pyre, or maybe it is the spirit of the woodland that is so close to my heart. Whatever drew me to the Monarch, I was happy to make your acquaintance, and I will return. But this is a fitting way to end my adventure through the Bronze Age on Summer Solstice Day in 2023. I hope you enjoyed our trip back to the Bronze Age and the solstice celebrations at Stonehenge. Depending on the time of year you do the walk, there are many things to see along the route, from the ancient earthworks to the woodlands and the magical bird song. If you do decide to follow the trail, please tell us about it on social media, or you can email us at info@wildlife-matters.org. That's info@wildlife-matters.org, and we'd love to hear from you. Thank you. After that exhilarating adventure, it's time to kick off those walking boots and tread barefoot to the edge of an ancient woodland. As we settle down, legs crossed, take a deep breath and let the tranquillity of the springtime woodland engulf you. We invite you to enjoy a mindful moment in nature. Well, I'm sure many of you will have recognised the call of one spring visitor to the UK who was in superb voice that morning. It was, of course, the cuckoo. But how many of you also heard the wonderful song of the redstart? It's in there, and so are the chaffinch and the chiffchaff. What a fantastic way to start any day with the spring song of the woodland. And that has been this week's Wildlife Matters Mindful Moments. We hope to see you in London on Saturday the 22nd of June. Coach services are travelling from lots of major cities and towns around the UK, and you can find out more information through the Restore Nature Now website. That website address is www.restorenaturennow.com. That's www.restorenaturennow.com. And if you want to look for the coach travel specifically, add /travel-coaches. We're so looking forward to meeting you on the day. Please come and say hello if you see us. We will be recording in the main meetup area before the march. During the march, we will be marching along the route with you, recording live, and we really want to hear you make some noise. So come on, guys. Once at Parliament Square, we will record the speakers and are really excited to chat with as many of you as possible. The Wildlife Matters Restore Nature Now special will be published on Wednesday, the 26th of June. But for now, I've been your host, Nigel Palmer, and this is Wildlife Matters signing off.